Brothers and sisters in the Lord, good morning.
Morning.
Now, as we tackle the topic, coping excellently with family crisis, I want you to realize one thing. When you read the Bible, you will find the stories of men and women that were used by God and that they were not perfect. They too were struggling and they too experienced the same problems that we do. When we look at it, the Bible never sugarcoated the situation of the men and women used by God. Now, whenever we talk about family crises, according to an expert, we all suffer from it. It just is a matter of degree. Maybe there are people who have more problems compared to others, but everybody suffers under family crises. My wife is a guidance counselor for college students, and this is what she has observed. Every time we discuss the situation, she says that as I look at students, like grades fluctuating, behavioral problems in school, most of the time when you search the details, this is what you discover, that they have problems in the family, and the reaction that they have is connected to it. Now, as we look at one of the men used by God in Scripture, we'll be looking at the life of Joseph, the Old Testament Joseph. We'll be looking at how he coped with family crises. Now, what is family crisis? According to experts, this is how it is defined. It is the situation that a family is experiencing and it demands changes. Why does it demand change? Now, the thing is, it will affect you in a negative way. It will affect the way you think. It will affect the way you feel. And definitely, it will basically unveil or reveal itself in your reaction towards other people. That's the reason why there is a requirement for change. But then when we look at this, continuing on, we see that there's a need for cooperation from every member to cope with the stress of life. Now, the family is considered the basic unit of society. If the family is experiencing crises, every member has to actually give input, meaning they have to do something about their situation in order to improve it. There's no such thing as a perfect human relationship on earth, family included. But there are those that basically succeed, and there are those that improve. And this is the goal that we basically would like to set. So whenever we talk about cooperation, there's a need for everyone to participate in the improvement of their own families. Experts are saying that there are two sources of family crises. The first one is called developmental. When we say it's developmental, it's the natural process undergone by a family. Well, it's like this. You have a boy and a girl, they love each other, they get married. Then in the course of their being together, they discover that not everything about the person they got married to is positive. There are negative things like character traits, behavior, likes and dislikes. This is developmental. Second, they have children. Probably if there's one child, or 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. No? However, the number of the children you will add in your family, these are developmental struggles or changes. So it's a developmental crisis. If a member of the family retires from work, that's developmental. If a family member dies, it's a developmental family crisis. Meaning, again, it's the natural process, the natural course of events that a family experiences. But then there's a second one. It's called the structural. Whenever we talk about the structural source of family crises, maybe we can illustrate it in two ways. Example, if the financial situation of the family is not improving, meaning there are needs and the resources are not enough, and there's fighting among the family members. No? One author put it this way. He said, pag may pera, nag-aaway. Pag walang pera, nag-aaway pa rin. So, huwag sisihin ng pera. Dahil yung pera nung nandyan, wala namang problema. Yung tao daw, nag-aaway. But when we look at this is structural. There is fighting among the members of the family because of a lack of resources. And when we look at it by design, do you think that God's design for the family is monogamous? Who agrees? One husband for one wife. You agree? Okay. Now that is basically a design. One person was challenging that when we were talking. Sabi niya, Pastor, how come in the Old Testament? It's quite unfair. When you look at the life of Solomon, for example, he has 1,000 wives. You look at the patriarchs, the kings. Well, I said, that's not the design. This is basically how people wanted to live their lives, and in the end, it basically caused their ruin. If you want to look at the intention, the design of God, you go back to the very beginning, the Garden of Eden. It would have been practical if God's intention was basically to populate the earth, to give Adam 1,000 years. And basically, the human population will boom, it will increase immediately. But then how many Eves were given Adam? Just one. So basically the idea is exclusivity. So that's the design. So if this is the design, it's a monogamous relationship, then there are relationships on the side, we call them extracurricular activities, then it's a structural problem. A family can suffer from one or both of these. No? So these are basically the sources of what we call family crises. Now, how can we cope with family crises? Let's just focus on three things, three main points. The first one, you have to understand the nature of the crisis of your family. It's hard to solve a problem if you don't know what the problem is. Okay? So you need to identify it. In my 22 years of being a pastor, most people come to me for advice. Some I can handle, some I can't. No? And I have to be honest with the situations I cannot handle. But then there are two cases that I can remember in particular because these are two different families. The person who approached me thought that they had black magic placed on their family. They think it's a curse. So I asked them what was the problem. One has a problem with alcoholism. He said, Pastor, I think some bad spell was put on our family since my foreparents, no? Great-grandfather, grandfather, father, and him. They became alcoholic. And he does not want his child to be an alcoholic like him. So he wants the chain to be broken. So I told him, I don't think it's a magic spell that was placed on your family. And so what's the problem? Sabi ko, in my studies, I discovered two things about alcoholism. Number one, it may have something to do with the modeling in your family. Example, you tell your child, I don't want you to be a drunkard. Bili mo ako ng Red Horse. Problema. Because you're saying something and you're doing something that's totally opposite. Instead of listening to what you're saying, the person will basically follow what you're doing. There's the second thing that you have to realize. If people in your family see drinking alcohol as something regular or normal, they tend to follow suit. What do I mean? Pag ang tingin nila sa alcohol ay mouthwash. Why? Early in the morning, you drink it. It's treated like vitamins. Every day, you have to have a dose of it. Or before you go to sleep, it's treated like sleeping pills. You have to take it so that you'll sleep. Basically, the members of the family will think it's normal, it's regular. So they basically tend to follow your modeling. And there's a third. This one I saw from the German channel. Some experts are claiming that they have a simple study that if a person is an alcoholic, for example, I am an alcoholic and I have children, these children will become more genetically predisposed towards alcoholism themselves. So if you would like to break the chain, it has to start from somewhere. And I was challenging this person, it has to start from you. So that's it. If he wants his children to basically escape that problem, there has to be somebody who will make a decision to do it. The other case is in connection to infidelity. This person is telling me, Pastor, how come womanizing is basically a problem in my family? Sabi ko, it's also a problem with me. I don't want the next generation to still have this problem. Sabi ko, it may have something to do with the reasoning or the thinking in your household. Sabi niya, paano? If you're making people realize that to be macho is to reason this way, pag ang palay na lumapit sa manok, tukain na. Magkakagulo talaga yung family niya. Because people will be thinking it's a simple thing. And it's a matter of making yourself feel male or masculine. And these types of reasoning or talk should be put aside. And you have to basically allow godly principles and the godly model to exist in your family. So, the first thing is understand the nature of your crises. The second, determine to be a better person in the process of family crises. There is a need for us to make a firm decision on this. Why? I was reading this book. The author is saying there are only two ways to react when a crisis hits you. Many people get destroyed by it. And yet there are those who rise above a crisis. And this is the challenge. In sociology, they have this concept of the broken window theory. Have you ever heard of this? For example, you get in, example, this is an abandoned building. You enter it with some friends. And when you're looking around, you see that it's filled with cobwebs and dust. Then there are certain, of course, window panels. And some of it were already broken by the people who probably went ahead of you. Imagine what you'll be doing with your friends. You most likely would be destroying the other window panels. That's basically, they say, a natural human reaction. You tend to destroy what you see to be destroyed in the first place. The broken window theory, if you apply it to human situations, it's like this. Sira na yung pamilya ko eh. magpakasira na lang ako. But I would like to caution you. We have a point of realization. Sooner or later, you'll realize you're damaging yourself. But the problem is, if you ruin yourself so much, recovery is harder. Pag mas konti yung problema, of course, much better yung coping, and definitely, mas malaki-laki yung chance of solving the problem. So please, do not ruin yourself. Determine to be a better person in the process of family crisis. Now the third, excuse me, we have to resolve to obey God throughout family crises. Why? Now, today, with today's technology, back then, if you would like to know your direction, what do you use? A compass. Okay, the ever-reliable sketch. I was given that, and baliktad pa. Ikot ako na ikot sa isang locality, nag-growing baliktad yung orientation binigay sa akin. But now, what do we have? We have high technology. Now, what do we do with the gadgets that we have? We have the GPS, right? The global positioning system. We know if we're supposed to turn left or right depending on your destination. We know the distance. But ang problema lang dyan, pagkawala ng baterya. Walang signal, or for some reason your app is not working. You cannot find your way. Now, whenever you're experiencing crises, this is something that you will realize. Everything seems to be dark. You don't see a bright future ahead. Everything seems blurry, right? And the one you should rely on is no other than God. He's the only one who has an overview of life. So if you would like to come out of a crisis, improved and not ruined, you have to rely on Him. There is a tendency to rebel against God when a crisis is occurring. And this is a reality. But remember, if God is going to show you victory and you're going to go the opposite direction, this is going to be defeat. If God is going to show you the way out and you go the opposite direction, you get lost all the more. So there has to be this resolution. We have to resolve to obey God in the midst of family crises. Well, let's look at the passage from Genesis 37, 1-8 read earlier. And let's understand the nature of the family crisis. Well, when we read the 8 verses, were you able to identify at least 3 problems in the family of Jacob? Now, let me pinpoint to you the 3 problems. How many wives did Jacob have in that particular story? Well, actually, if you know the whole story, there are 4. Yeah. You mentioned was Silpha and Bilhah, the servant wives. And Joseph, of course, had a mother himself, so that's the 3rd. And the sister of Joseph's mother was also a wife of Jacob, so we have 4. These are 4 wives under one roof. So what's the problem? Kakaroon talaga ng structural crisis here. And definitely that also took place. The second problem, it's called favoritism. Why favoritism? Well, you have to understand that when Jacob showed that he loved Joseph more than the others, Joseph felt being favored, but the others felt being rejected or being pushed away. And we have to understand Jewish custom. It's supposed to be the firstborn male that's highly regarded because he's to be the one who will get the inheritance. But Joseph at this point was already the son of his father when he was old. So the other brothers were older. And so that's a problem. Favoritism creates problems in families, right? And there's a third. This is what we call personality. What's the problema ba yung personality? Not necessarily. But at 17 years old, you have to understand that Joseph was given by God a vision. It was yet unclear to him what it all meant. But when he said it to his brothers, baka may konting yabang. Maybe he was proud when he was saying that his sheaf of wheat was standing up and everybody's sheaf of wheat was basically bowed down to him. And so his brothers, they're challenging him. They're saying, are you going to lord it over us? Ba't ikaw mamumuna sa amin? Baka yan, no? So to prove to you na, di ba, even if you have the same father and mother, you belong to the same family, you have different personalities? Yes. Kaya ako hindi ko maintindihan. Pareho naman kami ng magulang. Ba't ako okay naman? Mga kapatid ko, si Pastor Jebo. What happened? I don't understand. Okay, magsusumok. Alam ka naman, nung nakita sa akin, dito binenta na ako. Maganda. Sibling rivalry, family crisis, remember. These are probably at least 3 of the problems we can find in the life of Joseph, in the life of the family of Jacob. Now let's look at this particular set. The first thing we have to realize, relational conflict, it occurs when there's a threat to the needs of the individuals inside a family. Because these needs, you want them to be filled up. If they're not filled up, you react in a negative way. So let's identify at least three. The first one is called significance, the sense of being valued. Pag pinapahalagahan ka sa family, you're happy, right? But if you're somehow being neglected, you don't feel good at all. No? Because it's your need. You need to be recognized. Let me just give you a scenario. Kunyari na, when God poured out of heaven the gift of knowledge, katalinuhan, every one of your family members, they were awake. For some reason, you were sleeping. As you were growing up, you're affected. No? You're thinking, why is this taking place? You somehow get affected by your lack of memory of your parents assisting you every year. While you remember that every year they'll be attending graduation or awarding ceremonies for your brothers and sisters. Your walls are adorned with pictures of your parents putting medals and ribbons on your brothers and sisters. You have a glass case filled with the trophies, medals, and ribbons of your brothers and sisters. But you do not find yours. And you're thinking, why am I not valued? But you forgot one simple thing. Wala ka kasing award. But somehow, kahit hindi sinasadya, that basically is how you feel. Because they're given time, they're given importance. Another, some people in the family, medyo tactless. That's why we have to be careful with how we say things. Even in Scripture, in James, the tongue is a very powerful instrument. It can put people down and it can actually raise people up in connection to what's blurted out of your mouth. There are people who basically say this in the family. Minsan kahit pabiro, it scars people for life. Itong anak ko na ito, manang-mana sa akin. Matalino. Itong isa na ito, hindi ko alam kung saan. Napulot ko lang kasi. Sometimes it's just said in jest, pabiro lang, but it will basically affect a person. So we have to be careful of what we say. And people from the outside of the family sometimes also give their comments. And so how does it affect a person in the family? That hurts a person. Sasabihin nila, your other children gives you honor, and this one gives you dishonor. That hurts. So remember, the reason why a person is affected because the significance need is affected. Now there's a second here. It's called affiliation. The sense of being or being connected or related to others. Now, we need to be close to our parents. Kung ang yung children, yung medyo bata, okay? Yung mga medyo may edad na, you were able to observe this, I think. If your child is about 5 or 4 years old, then suddenly you have a baby, you know what happens? Now, at first, the child will be saying, oh, I have a brother, a new brother, a new sister, pantuan-tuwa kayo, ang bait. But once you carry the baby, what happens? This particular child reacts. Gusto niya bubuhatin din siya. So ngayon, pag hindi mo binuhat, what's the reaction of the child? Iiyak, magtatantrums. Bakit? Before, you were given that person time, attention, and you're making that person close to you. But now somebody else is taking that particular place, and this person feels that he's being put aside. Hindi yan natatapos dyan. Sometimes it's, as they grow, it will come this way. They'll be talking to each other and sasabihin ng isa, kaya ka naman pinapatulog ni mama at ni papa doon sa tabi ng bed nila eh. Kasi, paborito ka, sip-sip ka kasi. Yeah. Affiliation. It started from the time that they were young. And it also escalates from the time that they're already adults. Maybe the statements will be like this next time. Sasabihin naman, kaya naman nakuha mo lahat ng manay. Binipilog mo yung ulo ng mga magulang natin. Paborito ka kasi. Yeah. Affiliation problem. Whenever we talk about it, it is in connection to them being close or being put aside or being far off from their parents. The third, it's called competence. These are basically the roles we play in the family. You need to have a role that you fulfill or function for in your own family. If you don't have that, you get affected. It's a sense of being able to exert influence on others or control one's task. No? Example, who among your firstborn? Panganay. Okay lang yan. Tayo pinagpala tayo ng panganay. Ang reklamo daw ng panganay is like this. Kaya naman hindi ko na-enjoy yung childhood ko eh. Kasi, lagi niyo ako inutusan. Binigyan agad yung responsibility. Another thing that firstborns basically have is this. Their younger brothers or sisters see them as tigers or tigresses. Tingin, ikaw naman, Aya, ikaw naman, Achi. Sungit ka naman eh. Bibili lang sa tindahan eh. bibili lang ako doon. Why are you strict? Now the thing is, because if something happens to your younger brothers and sisters, who gets blamed for it? Ikaw. That's why there's a tendency to be strict. No? So yan yung pangalan. Sino bunso? Okay. Yung bunso naman, ito naman reklamo. Hindi nga account of a person. Sabi niya, Mama, huwag mo na akong pulbuhan. College student now. Kita naman classmates ko. Sometimes it's like that. No? You're being treated like a baby. Or the other one, a person I was talking to, he was basically unburdening himself. He's telling me, Pastor, saan ka naman nakakita? Lahat ng childhood pictures ko. Ang suit ko, butterfly designs and flower designs. Oh, what's the problem? Lalaki ako. And I'm wearing sandals because of the hand-me-downs, right? Di ba? If you have brothers and lalaki ka din, no problem. You get the hand-me-downs of your brothers. Kahit lumatis pang lalaki. Eh, puro ate yung nauna. Kumaris na. Dahil ng suit niya ng bata siya, yung mga damit ng mga pinaglumahan ng mga ate niya. So these are things that happen. No? So, yan daw, problema ng bunso. Who's the middle child? You can understand Pastor J. Middle children now, they react in this way. They have to excel so that they get noticed. Back it up. Most of the time, notice is given to the firstborn or the lastborn. Whether they like it or not, conscious or unconscious, sometimes they misbehave, sometimes, because now they need to get attention. Have you ever heard of the concept of the black sheep? Wala sana ganun. Kaya experts notice that may ganun. So that's why they have that label. It's not exclusive for middle children. It can come from firstborn, lastborn, or whatever birth order you have. Kaya nang by tally, they discovered that somehow most middle children ang nagiging black sheep. Hindi ko sinasabing problema kayo. That's just how I saw my brother. Babawi na po ako habang the thing is, whenever you look at competence, every one of us has a role to play in the family. If that role is set aside, you don't feel good. Maybe you remember a member of your family who cooks whenever there are family occasions. Do you have that person who prepares everything? Then suddenly somebody comes in and says, let's just eat in the restaurant, I pay for everything. This person is the only one who does not feel good. Tinanggalan mo siya ng papel. Iniisip mo bakit? Hindi ba masarap yung mga niluto ko dito? And of course, some of you will be saying, restaurant food is so tasty. Bakit? Yung piniluluto ko ba laso? So the person is reacting this way. At least dito wala na, nobody washes the dishes anymore. Iniisip niya, even if I wash the dishes, it's okay if I sacrifice things for you. Nawalan kasi siya ng role. Do you have Facebook? What are my friends here? Yeah, you're blessed people. If you're not yet my friend, you be friendly so that you get the blessing. Another quote. It's like this. Last December, I had to talk to a friend. And I said, you have to take down what you posted on your wall. Sabi niya, bakit pastor? Sabi ko, I don't think it's nice that private matters are actually seen by people. Hindi ba in public? You don't wash dirty linen in public. Sabi niya, wala naman ako masamang sinabi. Sabi ko, yung haba na yun. If a person knows how to read between this, you want to know kung ano yung nangyari. It's like this. No, you're not the person anyways. Ang point niya, when we were younger, people are always saying your hair is, it looks better than mine. When we were younger, our parents are always saying that you look more beautiful than me. These are two daughters, meaning an older one, the older sister, the eldest, and the second one is a sister as well. So, magkapatid. Yun pala, in December, the father got hospitalized. The bill ran up to about $500,000. Now, the firstborn, the husband only works in the Philippines, so he isn't that in sweldo. The secondborn, the husband works it's a foreigner. So, mas malaki-laki yung conversion ng pera. The firstborn is saying, let's just put Papa sa charity ward para hindi malaki yung gastos. But the the secondborn said, hindi, we put him in a semi-private room. Ako naman magbabayad, ako masusunod. Now, then the post came up. Why? She felt that her role, being firstborn, and somehow leader of the family, got overridden by what the second one suggested. But the second one was able to assert herself because she had influence. You get the point? So relational conflict, it has to have a source, and that's the reason why we have to identify. The second point is determined to be a better person in the process of your family crisis. Now let's just look at in passing certain events in the life of Joseph. Well, if bad things were planned against you by family members, of course that will hurt. But Joseph, the brothers planned to kill him. One intervened and he was not, they did not continue the plan of killing him. They threw him in a well and eventually sold him as a slave. And that was also a hurtful experience. But look at this. When Joseph was sold, he went to the house of Potiphar. Mind you, he could have thought this way. I was already disrespected by my brothers by treating me this way. Kahit saan ako pumunta, I'll show misbehavior. I'll disrespect other people because no one can be trusted. Not even my family. Pwede mong ganun isipin eh. But you know what? He did not do that. When he was in in Potiphar's household, he was taking care of everything. He established integrity. That was important. He wanted to show that there's something good in him. Second, when, mahalaga yung concept ng respect. Mrs. Potiphar had a liking for Joseph. They said that Joseph was handsome and he was basically a person of good build, good stature. And maybe every day, Mrs. Potiphar was enticing Joseph. Joseph, you look good. I also look good. Let's do beautiful things together. Parang something to that effect. But Joseph resisted. He had respect for God. He had respect for Potiphar. And he also had respect for himself. That's why he avoided Mrs. Potiphar. Now, to his detriment, Mrs. Potiphar falsely accused him in front of Potiphar, and so he was thrown into prison. Try to observe and read between the lines. In prison, thousands and thousands of years ago, people behaved like animals, according to one document. Because they were treated like animals. Ngayon, medyo iba na. Hindi ba, meron na kasi mga Human Rights Commission. Meron nga daw sa US, these people basically make a profession out of being prisoners. When they get released, yung prison sentence nila, tapos na, they commit crimes immediately so that they'll be sent back. Because in prison, they learn to live with the situation. Outside, they don't know how to cope with civilization. So what they do is to simply be there, libre daw ang food, libre yung lodging, may security ka na, and there's cable TV. In some prisons, that's what they do. But here, look at Joseph. Maybe the behavior of people all around him were barbaric, but it shows to live a life that's a little bit civilized. Now, this is the event. The Pharaoh, the most powerful man in the world during that time, the king of Egypt, threw in prison two people, staff members, the butler or baker, and the cupbearer. Now, if these people were dignified because they were serving royalty, most likely they'll be looking for somebody with a familiar way of life. Diba? A sense of familiarity. When we went to Korea last year, I was trying to ask directions on where we should go in destination namin. For some reason, when I was asking people in English, they tend to run away. Literally. They were going away. Sabi ko, bakit kaya? And then one person told me, ganun sila, pag hindi sila makasagot ng English, umaalis na lang. Then I heard a person speak in Tagalog. I ran after the guy. I needed somebody to talk to, somebody who understands me. Familiarity. In many cases, you see this. Now, probably these two staff members, they were comfortable with Joseph. And what did they do? They shared their dreams to him. And he was able to interpret. One, he said, would die, the baker. And the other one, the cupbearer, he said, would be reinstated in position. And that happened for them. Now, it so happened that the other event was that Pharaoh himself had a dream. Nobody can interpret. Now, the dream was simple. 7 cows came out of the river, fat cows, and then 7 thin ones immediately followed suit. And the 7 thin ones ate the fat ones. What's the meaning? I don't know. Gutom. Probably that's the only thing I can think of. But nobody in the whole of Egypt can interpret for the king, and he was already frustrated. The cupbearer remembered Joseph and got endorsed to the Pharaoh. And he interpreted. He said, the 7 fat cows are 7 years of good harvest. The 7 thin ones are 7 years of drought and famine. So, O king, God wants you to prepare. During the time of bounty, we will stock up on food so that during the time of famine, we will have food spared. No? And so Pharaoh was so happy. That's it. No? And he got a ring from his finger and placed it on the finger of Joseph and announced, you and I are now engaged. Anyway, that's a different version. No? That's extra biblical. When he was given the ring, he was told this, that he was now second in command in the whole of Egypt. And mind you, he became food's administrator. Look at that. When he was sold by his brothers as a slave, he was 17 years old. When he became administrator in Egypt, he was 30 years old. How long was he processed by God? 13 long years. But if ever you ask, because they say that Joseph became an effective administrator, where was he trained? You can find that in the 2 accounts of his life. He was trained in administration when he was caretaker of the household of Potiphar, and he became a good administrator when he was a an attendant or probably an assistant to the jail warden. And that's it. It was God's process all along. Now, the thing was, this dream was true. It really came true. How do we know about it? We just skip that. I've already stated that. Three things first. Joseph turned out to be a better person by, number one, being dependable in his work. No? Sometimes when you have some negative feelings or you have negative experiences, you tend to justify your behavior using them. Joseph did not do that. He wanted to show that there's something good in him. And what was good in him is that he can perform under pressure. He can probably deal with the negative things taking place in his life, and he was still to improve the quality of his work. And that was shown. And that's something that people like about him. The second, he was honest, no? And he showed integrity in what he was doing. So character, na-develop siya. That's very important. And the third, he was wise in the skill of counsel and administration. All the while, he had the gift of interpreting dreams. But if it were only his dream, probably he'd be confirmed. But then when he was able to interpret the dream of the baker, the cupbearer, or even the king himself, confirmed. Administration. Probably if he was not sold as a slave, and he was not a trusted prisoner, and became administrator of Egypt, we would know that this was his potential, the level of his capability. But I read from one book, and it was a very good analysis of the author. The author is saying, it's like this. There are people who are very intelligent. They're quite able to do things. But because their character is no good, not many people trust them. There are people who are not as intelligent as others. There are people who are not able as others. And yet many opportunities are opened up to them because of their character. Character matters. And that is quite important in the life of Joseph. Now, let's look at another passage. It's Genesis chapter 45, verses 4 to 8. Let me just read this to you. Then Joseph said to his brothers, "Come close to me." And when they had done so, he said, "I am your brother Joseph, the one you sold into Egypt." Now imagine, how come his dream was true? The family of Joseph was living near the border of Egypt. And they too experienced the drought and the famine. They needed to come to Egypt because Egypt was the only one prepared for it. And who was the one who was administrator of foods? Joseph. And so they needed to request food from him, so they needed to show respect. They were bowing down. The dream was true. Joseph recognized his brothers. Siguro kung ako siya. Did he struggle with the negative feelings? I believe so. If you read through the story, maybe. But he reacted properly. Yun yung mahalaga eh. The decision he made despite of what's taking place with him. Me, I could probably have insulted him. Ano sasabihin mo? So, gutom kayo. O, di umuwi na kayo. Mamatay kayo sa gutom. You can say that. Or probably can do something drastic. So you want free food? Yes. Well, our prisons are open for you. You can be here and then we will feed you free. Or probably can accuse them falsely and have all of them beheaded if he would allow his bitterness to rule him. But one thing good about Joseph is verse 5. Look at this. "And now do not be distressed and do not be angry with yourselves for selling me here, because it was to save lives that God sent me ahead of you." I mean, focus on verse 5. Yung Tagalog word is, nagparaya siya. I tried to read through the story, and you know what? Parang there was no remorse from among his brothers when they sold him as a slave. But he's thinking probably, baka naman nalungkot din sila. That's the reason why he's saying, do not be distressed and be angry with yourself. Were they angry with themselves? I don't think so. But that's what he was thinking for them. Sa English, ang tawag niya sa pagpaparaya, let it go. Let it go. I know it's a popular song, but hindi ko kakantay makamulang mula na ako. The second is this. He broadened his perspective. Now sometimes when we're angry, we become narrow-minded. You agree? Yeah. Sometimes we minsan yung sobrang galit natin, we put together reasoning that's not really rational. Sometimes it's only reasonable for us. We don't want to accept other people's explanation. That's the reason why we enter a vicious cycle. Parang lahat na lang isip mo magkakakampi, kaaway ka. Just for example, there are two people here that when I saw them, they started to look at me and then they started to laugh. Sasabihin ko, ba't ako pinagtatawanan? Pastor, we're not laughing at you. Hindi, pagpasok ko, exactly, you looked at me and then you laughed. You're laughing at me. Then somebody would say, Pastor, there's nothing like that. You're talking about something else. Ikaw, isa ka pa. I know you're the one who texted them that I would be coming. That's the reason why they were already prepared, looking at me and laughing. Familiar case? Most of the time, that's how it is when we're angry. Everybody gets to be blamed and they're all congregating against you. This is how we think. The bad thing is when you decide during the time that you're not. Kaya nga nagiging narrow-minded tayo. Kinakailangan maging broad-minded. Look at how he argued it. Do not blame yourselves, do not be angry with yourselves, because it was to save lives that God sent me ahead of you. So, tingnan niyo yung verse 8 na lang. So then it was not you who sent me here, but God. He made me father to Pharaoh, lord of his entire household, and ruler of all Egypt. It's like this. God sent me ahead of you so we won't go hungry. Imagine. That's how he was thinking. So he was looking at the brighter side of it rather than, di ba? The Americans have the saying, do not cry over spilled milk. You agree with that? Yeah. He could probably say that 13 years I was not able to be with my father. And he basically gave in to his anger and his bitterness and did not allow them to be near him anymore. And he could have missed the last remaining years of his father being alive, and he would have regretted it. I've been a pastor for 22 years, and I've seen a lot of funeral services, interments, wakes, and everything. Here at Grace Gospel Church, you've been kind to us as a family. I'm going to give you a special privilege. All of you who would like to have me speak in your wake, please have yourselves registered. There's a piece of paper outside. Sulat nyo lang kung kailan kayo balang pampana. It's like this. Yung pinaka-intense na cries during wakes has something to do with regret or remorse. Sometimes it's like this. If I only knew that you'll be passing on, if I only knew that you'll be dying, I should have forgiven you. I've even seen somebody fall into the hole. Parang, kasi, this one I would like to tell you as a brother in Christ, please. If you're going to cry out and pour out yourselves, your heart when you're in an interment service, when ilulubog niyo yung coffin sa Memorial Garden, please, stay in one side and don't magdupasay. No? Why? I saw somebody fall into the hole. Sasama ako. Pag nahulog, hindi naman sasama. I wanted to tell the undertaker, cover her with soil. Kasi we were already very serious. I was reading Ecclesiastes 3, a time for everything. Then suddenly she comes in, iyak lang iyak. Everybody was already in panic because she's dead. Nahulog siya. And that's the only funeral service I remember that everybody ended up laughing. Parang gulo. So that's just a friendly advice, a brotherly advice for you. Point. Yung iba, they talk to insects. Believe me, they talk to insects. Pastor, I was not able to talk to my relative when he or she was alive. But I believe that the butterfly that went on to the coffin was the spirit of my departed loved one. Talaga? Parang so kinausap ko siya and I told that person, okay na kami. Nagalaw yung wings, Pastor. That was another talk to my Well, butterflies, they always move their wings. And people do not become insects when they die. But sociologists are saying, why do people have this? Why do we talk to insects when people die? It's because we know that we have already lost the opportunity of actually communicating with a living person. We lost the opportunity, the time to do that when they can still talk to us. And now that they're dead, we're looking to insects, pigeons, or whatever. Because we would like to express ourselves. We would like somehow that the guilt feeling would be covered up. Or at least we say what we were not able to say. That's it. But you know what Joseph did? When you read Genesis, it ends in chapter 50. You find there that Joseph did certain things that you will find impressive. Number one, despite of probably the stirring up inside, he gave them the best supplies possible. Sent them home. Even told them, do not argue along the way. Second, he had them bring their father to him. Dalhin mo dito yung father ko. And when they did so, they were only able to stay in a place called Goshen. It's a place for commoners, or second-class citizens in Egypt, because Israelites were not highly regarded in Egypt. But Joseph was royalty. He rode his royal chariot and went there to Goshen. When he saw his dad, he embraced his dad and started crying. He does not care what other people see or what other people would feel. It's important for him to tell his father, I love you and I miss you. That was very crucial. Okay. Egyptian royalty don't show that kind of emotion in public, but he did. When the Pharaoh asked, who are they? Pwede naman yan deny, oh, they are hungry people. I had so much pity for them, I cried. Pwede naman. But he did not do that. Now, one lady approached me several years ago. Sabi niya, Pastor, should I say sorry to my mom? Bakit? Kasi, I hold office in Ortigas, yes. Kasi my mom brought me yung ulam, cooked food, and then remembered me. And then when their lunchtime, bago yung lunch break, the guard approached my cubicle, my desk, and said, somebody's looking for me. When I looked up, I saw my mom. She's wearing her duster. Some others, right? They have yung pang duster pang bahay and duster pang labas, depending on the design. But the other office members, office mates asked, who's that? Alam mo, sagot niya, yung tindera ng ulam sa baba, nagpatiligur ako dito. Sabi ko, you should say sorry to your mom. Sometimes in panic, probably sometimes consciously, we do that. No, we deny our family members. We don't want them recognized in public. Napak nahihiya or something. Sabi ko, if I were your mom, I would have disowned you. Pinag-usap sila. So I talked to her after that. Sabi niya, nako, Pastor, instead of crying, my mom scolded me. When I was young daw, pasaway daw ako. I was never disowned. I was always, with pride, my mom would always tell people, anak ko yan. Ngayon daw, nagdala lang ako ng ulam. Wala naman masama sa nagbibenta ng ulam. Kaya tinawag ko daw siya takatinda ng ulam. Kahit hindi. It hurts. But you know what? When Joseph said, this is my family, and that worked for him. The Pharaoh said, don't stay there. Bring them to where you live. And where did he live? If you read the story, you know that he lived in the district of the Pharaohs. And there's where he had his family live. And then the last remaining years of his dad, he was able to be with Joseph, and Joseph was able to be with his father and his family. And then the father died. The brothers thought that they and their family would be booted out of Egypt because there's no longer any reason for Joseph to keep them. But Joseph said, no, stay there. I'll take care of you. That's why when you read through the story, you find out that even during his old age, Joseph was able to have come close to him, many members of his family. Sa Tagalog nga, naikalog pa niya yung mga apo niya sa pamangkin. Imagine. There's no such thing as a perfect relationship, as I've said earlier, but there are improved relationships. And I believe this one was improved, right? Because of the decision Joseph made. I believe the God factor in his life mattered much. That is important, that we allow God to work in our lives. No? So the major question is this. Why would God allow us to experience crisis? Well, according to one expert, there are 3 reasons for it, at least in the life of Joseph. Number 1, it's not just for our character development, but that's also important. I was asked by one person, negative situation, Pastor, bring out good character in us? Yes. Are you aware that you cannot have patience if there's no irritation? And you cannot have long suffering if there's no suffering and it's not long. It's logical, right? Talaga ganun, long suffering crisis, they fall out of negative situations. Yung second, it is also for us to basically hone our skills and character. Like Joseph, nakita yung capabilities in that particular experience. And the last, it is to reflect our Christ-likeness, godly character. We're not perfect, but we can manifest godly character. When Joseph cared for his family, was he manifesting godly character? Was God a caring God? Is God a caring God? Yes. So he's reflecting it. Is God a God who forgives? Yes. When he forgave his family, was he reflecting godly character? Yes. When he loved his family unconditionally, was he reflecting godly character? Yes. So that's among the things that basically gets produced in our lives whenever there is crisis. So remember, family crisis is normal. It's just dependent on the degrees that we basically experience in life. There are those who have more struggles and they're compared to others who probably have less. But the reaction that we basically make whenever we're experiencing crisis matters much. Some get ruined by it, but like Joseph, let's decide to improve or rise above the crisis and allow God's will to take place and unfold in your family and mine to make it better. God bless you.